Is your microphone on?
Nope. Let it begin. Better?
So you'll just say what meeting this is and then the day and time.
This is the July 20th, 2016 Open Space and Ecology Committee meeting, and it would help if I had brought glasses. I do have glasses. So should we start with the adoption of the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I just had the most perverse inclination to also say nay.
So that's one nay, 2 yays.
We're going to make this a
Motion
short meeting,
overruled.
guys.
Yeah, I do need to make it a short meeting because I have something I have to do after.
Good. Okay, next subject we're going to move on to is oral communications.
I have one. If anybody out there is listening, I'd like to remind everybody that this Saturday is our Habitat Restoration Day. It's a joint project with the City of Brisbane, the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation, San Bruno Mountain Watch, and Open Space and Ecology Committee. And it is taking place at Sierra Point Road Canyon. Natalie, what are we on the? Where's the gathering place?
It's at the corner of Sierra Point and San Benito.
So at the corner of Sierra Point and San Benito, 9 a.m. You can come anytime. Will be 9 until 1. It includes a T-shirt and lunch, and please wear long sleeves and long pants.
It's meeting at the corner of Sierra Point and San Benito?
Sierra Point Road and San Benito Road, the corner that's closest to like 300 Sierra Point Road.
Okay, so
Okay.
it's not going to be meeting at my house then?
No, it's
Okay.
not going to be meeting at the
Sure.
other junction of Sierra Point and San Benito, and where the canyon is, because we'll be working in that canyon.
Which canyon?
Sierra Point Road Canyon. It's called Sierra Point Canyon. There's a little sign there.
Okay.
Okay. And so please bring your friends, your family, everybody come. If you have questions, you can call 415-508-2118. And that's it for that.
Okay, just for the official record, most people consider that road visitation in Sierra Point where you guys are meeting.
Right, except technically it's not.
I know, I'm just throwing it out there so people don't show up at my house.
You just direct them to the right place.
I don't know, they
Bring
can
them
show up at my house,
backyard,
that'd
put
be
them to
good.
work.
Yeah, you say, I have work for them.
Got plenty of restoration to do.
This is a new site for us, so I'm pretty excited about us working this site.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other oral communications and or public comment?
Is Glenn coming? Do we know? Because I don't think she said she was going to miss, or at least I didn't know. Okay. I'm sad, Glenn. Okay, that's it. I have a couple of more things, but I think I'll bring them up under chair and committee member matters.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move on then to the review of memorandum concerning methods to restrict use of city-owned parcels in Brisbane acres. Something, Bruce, I can't read the rest of it, I got cut off.
With Michael Roosh, our city attorney.
Well, there we go. That's what it says.
Just a quick introduction.
It's a little different.
Open Space has brought this up about preserving or providing a better method to restrict use of city-owned Brisbane acres. And it was also brought up by a member of the audience, Paul Buscal, and it was also brought up to the council. So the council did direct the city attorney to look into options and put a memo together. So at this point, we're reviewing the memo with the city attorney available to explain and answer questions, and our recommendation would then be brought to council at a regular council meeting. So I'll let you.
There we go. Mr. Chair and the members of the committee, Michael Roush, City Attorney here in Brisbane, pleased to be with you tonight. I haven't had the opportunity to sit with you before, and so looking forward to answering any question that you have about this topic. I'm assuming that you've read the memo that I prepared to the mayor and the city council, but let me just go over some of the highlights of that and then be glad to answer any questions or concerns that you have.
Real quickly, could we hold just for 1 second? Glenn's walking in right at the moment.
Sure.
So might as well get started with her at the beginning. Perfect timing. You got here at the right time.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm glad you're here.
You know we're having a Habitat Restoration Day Saturday, right? That's all you missed. Okay.
So we're just starting, Glenn, on the discussion of the review of memorandum concerning methods to restrict uses of the acres.
Of the approximately 110 parcels that are in the area called Brisbane Acres, the city owns 44 of those parcels. And fortunately, of those 44, 29 were purchased through either state or federal funding. And through those funding mechanisms, those properties were essentially deed restricted to basically open space and habitat preservation. And therefore, while I suppose it is technically possible that that could be undone, it just seems very, very unlikely to get both a city council and a state agency and or a federal agency to agree to that. So I won't focus on those, but instead we'll focus on the 15 or so properties that the city purchased without those deed restrictions, and certainly any potential properties that the city may purchase in the future from funds that aren't otherwise deed restricted. Generally, there are 4 types of mechanisms that cities typically employ in order to restrict future uses of the property. Those would include what are called conservation easements, conveyances in fee to another public entity or a land trust, a declaration of restrictions, or certain land use restrictions such as zoning regulations.
I wanted Natalie to scroll.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. The conservation easement, as you might see, glean from the name, it's a recorded agreement between a property owner, here the city, and a qualified public or private entity. And the purpose of that easement would be to protect the character of the land, such as for natural, scenic, habitat, historic, agricultural purposes. And once it's granted, in order to undo it, as it were, the easement holder would have to agree to that, as well as the property owner itself. And since most of these private or public institutions that hold this would have no interest in relinquishing that easement, it is a fairly safe way that property could be restricted as to its use. The downside, as it were, for using a conservation easement is the fact that there's the fiduciary duty inherent in the easement holder holding these particular kind of easements, because they have an obligation to monitor the property to make sure it is being used consistent with the easement, and therefore most of the easement holders will require the grantor of the easement to fund the ongoing responsibility to look after the property. So typically the grantor, say a city or a county, will set up an endowment fund that it will give to the institution, and the interest off of that money then will be used to fund the ongoing obligation. The second issue is that in order to grant an easement of that kind, you want to grant an easement to an organization that you feel has the capability of carrying out its responsibilities, that it's stable and will be there for the long haul, so that the easement doesn't get passed off to another potential easement holder that the city may not have wanted in the first instance. The second method would be a conveyance to another public entity or a land trust. So, for example, if you would convey it to the county of San Mateo, they certainly do hold properties. But again, the downside there is that the county may want some money in order to maintain the property, and secondarily, because the city would no longer own the property in fee, it would lose direct control over the maintenance efforts that it currently provides on those properties. A third option would be what's called a declaration of restrictions, similar to conditions, covenants, and restrictions that a developer might impose on a subdivision before the lots are sold. This is a document that the city itself would execute and would record against the property, thereby putting anyone who was going to have an interest in purchasing that property that there were certain recorded restrictions against the property, and those restrictions again would limit the use to habitat and open space. Obviously, one of the downside of that, of course, is that the city created the declaration of restrictions, and presumably a city council could also undo it, leaving aside the political reality of that. It still would be an option for a future city council to do. Similarly, the fourth potential mechanism, land use restrictions, whereby the city would either through a general plan amendment or through zoning regulations, limit the use of that property or those properties in the Brisbane acres to open space or habitat. The downside there, of course, is that it's not appropriate just to spot zone certain parcels. You would have to general plan or zone a considerable area, and by doing that, to limit the uses to just open space or habitat, a property owner could potentially say that constituted a taking of the property and would seek to have the city compensate it for the loss of value of that property. So when you compare those four options, I think the safest course of action would be the conservation easement. That's the one the city would have the most control over. And that would be the one that if I were going to recommend a course of action would be the one that I would suggest. But certainly if the committee has a feeling about other methods, that we'd certainly appreciate hearing that. One other thing I would mention that's mentioned in the memo is that there could be the creation of what's called an open space district, be a special district like you have with the Guadalupe Valley Municipal Utility District or Improvement District. This would be an entity separate from the city, although typically the city council would serve as the board members of the open space district. In that situation, those districts have a lot of power to be able to go out and acquire property through bond financing, et cetera. The impediment, as it were, with respect to these districts is that to create that, you have to get the approval of the Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO. LAFCO typically doesn't like to create new districts unless there's a compelling reason to do so. And secondarily, there may be opposition from some of the property owners within the district, because potentially the district would go out and issue bonds in order to acquire property, and the payments for those bonds would have to be assessed against those property owners in order to pay off the bonds. That concludes my report. Be glad to answer any questions about any of the items I've discussed or any other matters concerning this issue.
Who's LAFCO?
LAFCO is the Local Agency Formation Commission, and it's a combination of persons appointed by the Board of Supervisors. There's usually two representatives from the cities throughout the county, and then also a member of the public. And it serves to deal with typically annexations. And so if a city wants to annex property, for example, to increase its boundaries, as it were, you have to go to LAFCO in order to get LAFCO's approval. And similarly, if a city wants to extend its utilities outside of its boundaries, you have to go to LAFCO to get its approval as well.
Michael, could you explain just a little bit more about that process? And let's say we wanted to do that. I think that we could do that.
And when you say that, you're talking
About forming the open space district.
Sure. It can be initiated two different ways. It can be done through a petition process where you get approximately, I think it's 25% of the property owners in the area to do it. Alternatively, the city council can initiate that process through a resolution process. And if that is done, then again, you form, essentially you go out and the city staff would come back with, this is the parameters of the district. It would involve going to the property owners, letting them know about wanting to form the district. There's a process by which people within that district could oppose the formation because they didn't want it. So there's a process you go through in terms of getting the district generated. Then, and when you had it ready to go, you would go to the LAFCO, and if the LAFCO approved it, then the district would come into existence.
So at this point, isn't the city, it says right here, typically 25% of the registered voters within the proposed district. That's what it says on the
Yes.
paper.
Mhm.
But you said 25% of the property owners. That's different than 25% of the proposed voters within the district.
Fair enough, and I misspoke. It
which
is
is-
registered voters, not to form the district.
Okay, and it would be in the district that was being formed,
Correct.
which basically has very few registered voters in it.
That may well be true.
Okay, because that's how we acquired the Baylands. And if we do it now, while there are virtually no registered voters in that district, we may be able to do that. Plus, the city owns more than 25% of the property at this point.
Well, I think the technical difficulty is the city's not a registered voter, but I think the idea would be that the city itself can begin the formation process through a resolution of intention. Doesn't have to get 25% or any percent of the registered voters to go along with it. I think the idea, though, would be if there was an interest in that staff would certainly reach out to not just the registered voters, but all the property owners within the area, just to get a sense about whether there's support for forming this district. Wouldn't be determinative, but that would probably be the way that the council would want its staff to handle it.
Is it just the people within the district who would be responsible for paying debt service assessed against parcels in the district? That confuses me a little bit. So it wouldn't be the whole city, it would just be...
Correct. It would be just the folks within the district, including, for purposes of this, it would also include the city, because the city would own parcels within the district.
Okay.
And so the city would pay its pro rata share of that as well.
Okay.
And what would that be?
Well, again, it would just depend on depend on how much money was being generated to purchase other property within the district. So it's difficult it's like any other bond, when the city sells bonds, usually paid back over a 15 to 20 to 30-year period with interest, and depending on, how secure the funding is, will generate or will decide what the interest rate is, and depending on the amount involved and the interest rate will determine what the premiums are on an annual basis.
I'm not sure I understand that in terms of there's not going to, if we purchase it make an open space district and it becomes an open space district, I don't understand, it's not like it's going to be developed so there'd be a payback on the bonds.
Well, whoever owns the property would be responsible for paying, it would show up on the tax bill, for example. So if you're a private property owner within this district and the district has issued bonds in order to purchase other properties, on your tax bill you're going to have a line item that says City of Brisbane Open Space District, and you would pay that, and those funds would then be used to make the payments on the bonds.
So let me see if I understand this. If we turn the Brisbane Acres into an open space district, the city would be the majority but not sole property owner in that space. And then if there was one of the parcels that in the future came up for sale and the open space district decided to levy money to purchase that and use a bond, then the city would be responsible for paying the lion's share of that bond, but the current property owners would also be saddled with a small percentage of that bond repayment of those people who live up there in developed parcels.
As long as a private property owner owned the property, that property owner would be paying the bonds. Once it's sold to the city, for example, then that property owner isn't going to be responsible anymore, and the city would take over the payment on that, on that piece of it. But if a developed piece of property, for example, would pay, if that person stayed on that property, they would continue to pay a share of that bond, notwithstanding the fact that their parcel was developed.
Yeah, okay. I think I
In
understand.
addition to their property tax.
Yes, it's just like a line item. It's like a parcel tax or any other number of special taxes that might be on your property tax bill.
But they would also enjoy the benefit of not having any further development in their area.
But that's, that's part and parcel of why you'd create the open space district, because presumably there is a benefit to having that benefit.
Should they desire. Question, if there's a percentage of property owners is there a percentage that need to approve this to get this open space district? And what if like one person was like, no way, Jose? What does that do?
Yeah, it's a situation where there's typically a majority protest in terms of forming the district. I mean, that's usually the criteria. I don't have right here in front of me what that is, but it's typically not one person would not be able to stop it, but if there was a majority protest, as a practical matter, either it would stop by operation of law, or typically most councils would say, look, we don't really have the support of the people who are going to be within this district, and we'll find some other means to accomplish the goal here.
Okay, thank you.
So it's not something that ever gets passed under duress.
I'm not saying it couldn't happen that way, but typically, just because of the political reality, it often or typically does not. I mean, there could be a situation where, for whatever reason, even though many people objected, there was still some overarching goal that the council wanted, and they would go ahead notwithstanding that, but that's usually not the political reality that most councils work under.
And what if the open space district was defined without the properties that are already developed?
Well, I mean, I suppose you could gerrymander the district boundary such that developed properties would be excluded, but it would look maybe somewhat odd. Without really knowing where those developed properties were, you might end up with kind of a checkerboard-looking district that I suppose would be okay, but...
I mean, that's why we don't own the signal light at Geneva and Bayshore. We didn't want it. We couldn't afford it. So I don't see why we would object to having a checkerboard pattern if it accomplished what we needed.
Not saying you couldn't, I'm just saying that would be an issue.
I have a question. Would that influence LAFCO? Do you have any
Yeah,
opinion
that's
about
my
that?
question.
Yeah, I don't know whether that would influence LAFCO or not. I think typically when you have a district sort of looking for something that looks logical, and if you suddenly now carve out different pieces, it could raise an additional issue for LAFCO.
Oh, I think LAFCO owes Brisbane a few favors, considering our history with them.
Is there any way to tweak these arrangements so that the property owners would not be responsible for the interest on bonds from acquiring new space? Because it seems to me that's likely to be the biggest source of opposition. So is there any way to write it up so that this, the general property owners of Brisbane were responsible for paying the interest on those bonds, instead of just sticking those particular property owners with the bill, because that seems like it's kind of going to be a non-starter with those property owners. At least that's my guess.
The difficulty I see with that is that unless the whole city or a good portion of the city was within the district, I think the difficulty is that if you were to ask the city's general fund, for example, to pick up that cost, that might be construed as a gift of public funds, because now the taxpayers, as it were, whose money is being used in the general fund, is being used to pay for a benefit of only a very few. I'd have to think about that in terms of whether or not there would be a way to not have the private property owners pay for a piece of this, but it kind of runs contrary to the whole concept of what the open space district is supposed to do. But I'd have to think a little bit more about that.
Are there other examples in the city of Brisbane where we have special districts that the general fund contributes to maintenance of, such as Sierra Point or Guadalupe Valley or any of the other districts?
They particularly don't contribute to both of those districts. Those are separate. They're funded by those properties within those boundaries, and those funds are separated.
And the marina too?
Sierra Point.
Yeah.
Sierra Point Lighting and Landscaping Assessment District.
Okay.
Yes.
Could we look at the conservation easement again?
Sure. This is it's typical of just what most easements are, where the city does not give up the fee interest in the property, but is granted to an easement holder in perpetuity. My experience has been often in the agricultural area, where a developer, for example, is required to dedicate a conservation easement in exchange for development of other pieces or other parts of the property. And so, for example, that might be something that would be put into either open space or vineyards or something of that nature. And you have a number of land trusts that have been set up expressly for this. And when that happens, in this case, the developer would put up an endowment fund that would go to the land trust, and so the land trust then has the funds on an ongoing basis in order to have the resources to go out and make sure that the property is being used consistent with the easement.
Okay.
So do you ever set them up where it's not contingent on a development, because we don't want it to be contingent on something?
No, I was saying, I was using that as the example where the developer owns the property and as part of the development sets aside, let's say, some number of acres that's going to be in the conservation easement. In this particular case here, the city would grant the conservation easement to the land trust or some other entity, and then the city presumably would have to come up with an endowment so that the easement holder would have funds to continue or to provide the necessary resources to make sure the property was being used properly.
And what about the deed restriction type of mechanism for protection?
Well, you're talking in...
There's two different things. I mean, I'm just curious because on the conservation easement.
I mean, the conservation easement is, in a way, like a deed restriction, because it's a recorded document that basically restricts the use of the property to the purposes consistent with the easement. Just like when the city bought property and used state money, there were deed restrictions attached to that basically prohibit the use of the property except as open space and habitat. And that's essentially what the conservation easement does as well. If the city were to sell the property to, say, the county of Alameda or a land trust, we would deed restrict it that way as well. But again, that gives up the city's fee interest in the property, which it may not want to do.
Can the city not grant a conservation easement and still retain the property?
Well, the city would retain ownership of the property by granting a conservation easement. The city would still be the owner in what's called in fee. It was just that the easement would be granted to the easement holder, and the property would then be restricted as to what those purposes that easement is.
And the city can't be the easement holder?
Well, the city can't grant an easement to itself.
Because?
Well, because the city owns the fee, it's just legally, the city can't, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but if the city owns all of it, an easement is a piece of that, and it just doesn't make sense legally for the city to grant a piece of something that it owns in its entirety.
As a protection mechanism, I don't see why not.
Well, because it wouldn't be recognized, I mean, legally, you can't grant an easement to yourself. You have to grant it to somebody other than yourself.
On a sort of long shot chance that we found somebody to hold the conservation easement, if I'm saying that right,
Yes.
what would happen if new properties were acquired?
You would then.
Could you just include those?
Yeah, you would, as you acquired the property, then, once we got title, we would then turn around and grant a conservation easement over
Okay.
that property to the property that had been acquired.
Okay.
Got a question for you. How much money are we talking about?
It really kind of depends on the level of, what would be involved in the making sure that the property was not being used improperly. And that might mean 2 or 3 visits a year. Maybe it means a monthly visit. It probably isn't a great deal of money, but without having discussions with the easement holder in terms of what it thinks it's going to take to perform its responsibilities, it's a little difficult to say. It's simply that there usually is a component of that has to be figured into the equation.
Sure, would that include like maintenance and taking care of it and things like that as well, or is that just on the side or separate?
That would be, typically, you could request that, but that would typically be somewhat outside the ambit of the easement holder. There would be looking at it more for the open space and habitat. The maintenance aspect would probably still remain with the city, because the city might have certain standards that it wishes to employ on that particular piece of property.
Okay, so the city would still cover the cost of non-native plant removal type.
Yes, but I mean, again, depending on what who the easement holder is, if that easement holder was some organization that the city felt could do that, you could certainly add that to its list of responsibilities. It's just typically not the kind of thing that the easement holder would do, not to say that it couldn't happen.
Right.
So, Michael, can I ask kind of a little bit of an off-the-wall question? I'm sorry, I'm trying to think a little outside the box. But on declaration of restrictions,
Yes.
I can't help but read that last little part of the sentence that said it would not guarantee it. But if a declaration of restrictions was enacted by our current city council, could it include a caveat that said any reversal of that would be mandated, could only be mandated by 2/3 vote of the people of Brisbane, so that it wasn't left up to a future individual city council? Could that kind of extra protection be put into that?
I think it could. I'm a little bit concerned about the 2/3 vote, but I would think that you could put that in there. The difficulty there, of course, is that it's a document that the city council is authorizing, and since the council authorized it and it has this provision, city council technically could take that provision out as well. The only way that you would, only way to guarantee it would be to somehow put it to a vote of the people where the voters voted it in the first instance, and then it could only be changed by a vote of the people. By simply putting it in the Declaration of Restrictions, I don't think is going to again, it might give a little better assurances, make it more difficult, but not impossible to get rid of.
Okay. Because, I mean, right now, we are where we are. But 50 years from now or 100 years from now, we might not be. And I would want this not to be something that could be undone by, an aggressive pro-development council. I would want it to really be the voice of the people, a lot of people, who said, yeah, we're going to totally rape our environment and destroy this, And even then, I wish it wouldn't happen that way, but we can't predict the future that far in advance, but we can certainly do a lot to lock it down and make it as safe, as secure as possible for the future.
And I think to that score, my sense of it is the conservation easement is your best route. And we could, if the open space district has an interest on the part of the committee, we can certainly flesh that detail out in more particulars for the council to consider, sort of give it a 30,000-foot view for purposes of this memo. But if that's something the committees would like the council to consider in more detail, we can certainly provide that kind of detail to the council so it can kind of look at the pros and cons of whether or not that might be something it wishes to pursue.
So from my point of view, the two things that I'm concerned about is, one, that we protect what we already have in perpetuity to the best of our ability. The trouble with the conservation easement, which I think is good, but it would involve another entity. And that's sometimes challenging to find another entity that we would trust to that level that was that established, because you see how easily third-party entities can come and go. So I kind of like the deed restrictions with, with the extra caveats personally. But whatever we can do to protect it, I think, is the best thing. If we could get, a very solid land trust to come along and help us, like Peninsula Open Space Trust, that would be different. But there's always going to be funding issues. The other part of it is that I would really like us to pursue the idea of an open space district. And it's going to be challenging because we may have to have it a bit patchwork to eliminate people who are already, have already developed parts of the acres if they don't want to participate. But the advantage to us in doing that is the funding mechanisms for acquiring the rest of the lots and properties that aren't developed, so that we have a contiguous protected habitat and view shed, that particularly habitat, but the view shed, of course, is important too. Because every part that we delve further into the habitat, like in the open space plan, where the lots that are adjacent to already developed lots weren't considered a priority and aren't deemed a priority conservation, we need to protect those too, because you can't go right up to the line. And I just feel like it's really, really important that we do that area. We are so blessed in that area. It's one of the most wild and pristine habitats left on the mountain. There are species that live there that don't live anywhere else. Some of the last few native grasses in California are there. Not just San Bernardino Mountain or the Bay Area, but in California, some of the last native grasses are there. And I think it's incumbent upon us to protect that as best we can for the future.
I agree with a tremendous amount of what Michelle said. On paper, the conservation district seems the most appealing, but I also am very conscientious of the rights of property owners here in the city of Brisbane. And I think whatever we do, we need to respect them as well as respecting the mountain. I don't think it does any good to throw one party under the bus for another party. I mean, respect is all built on mutual caring. So, some problems there, as Michelle pointed out.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting the more patchwork approach.
Maybe the patchwork approach is the right approach.
Because maybe some of these property owners would like to be able to sell their properties at a reasonable price, and having a funding mechanism to do that, we could do that.
Yeah, yeah. My concern was mostly for the people who might be assessed, but, you know, if we can make the district go around them, maybe that's the answer. I'm not quite sure. I don't think I have enough information or enough time really to give a strong opinion on that.
Can I point out one thing? A bond issue is not the only way to fund
That's
those
true.
properties. And he's just pointing that out as one downside. That is not the only way to fund.
Yeah.
And so the likelihood of that happening is slim. It'd be more likely that we would be able to get grants and matching funds to be able to purchase properties.
Is that what we've done before, Michelle? We've gotten matching
Yes,
funds?
I
Yeah.
don't believe we've ever used a bond to do that.
Yeah, the city's used some of, I think it's general fund money. Would a conservation district, do you have any sense of whether that would increase or degrade our ability to get funding, exterior funding?
Yeah, I think, no, I don't think if you created an open space district that it would be any different
Okay.
for all practical purposes as a city trying to get grants in order to acquire open space. It's the other side of the same coin.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Conservation easement, you know, it's always a little sad to send some of the money and the power away, but there's some good things about that too. Conveyance, I feel like that's right out. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I mean, I think surrendering control is not the right way to gain control. So
It kind of depends on,
who we send it to, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely to some level.
if it's, Peninsula Open Space Land Trust
Okay.
or some other venerable, Golden Gate Recreation, National Recreation, there's some, very trusted
Okay.
open space trusts that have huge funding mechanisms for being able to do what we can't.
Yeah. And I also liked what Michelle said about the declaration of restrictions. If we could find some way to put that to the vote, that might make it feel a little stronger, a little more solid. So that's just kind of my general thoughts on those things. I mean, none of them really seems ideal out of the gate. And then one question I had for you was, one of our concerns was about the parcels that had been bought with grant money. There were some questions about if the city chose to repay those agencies, could it then free the deeds, or is that not possible?
It is very unlikely. Again, typically, the agencies that provided that funding in the first place provided that funding in order to preserve the property and open space and habitat, and the fact that the city now may be willing to repay that agency for what it provided to the city would be at cross purposes for what that agency was created for in the first instance. So can't say that it could never happen, but it would be extremely unlikely that scenario would come down that way.
Okay.
So there would be not only the political pressure on the council not to do that, but the sort of the internal bureaucracy of the state and federal agency to say, this is not why we gave the money in the first place.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the funding sources is California Coastal Conservancy.
Well, what if they went away as an agency? Then where would we be? Because, I mean, frankly, I never thought it would happen, but we sold that property to the bakery that was public land. So, my trust in that was shaken.
I can't say that the Coastal Conservancy will be here, 200 years from now. I mean, there's certainly always the what ifs, and I think by acquiring the properties through those types of grants really gives you, the city and the residents, the best guarantee that nothing's going to happen with it. But obviously, 500 years from now, I can't tell you what's going to be the outcome of that.
I'm more worried about 20 years and 50 years from now. If we get past that, we'll be probably all right.
I really appreciate you coming tonight. That's all the questions I have.
Yeah, okay.
Do we have any kind of,
Consensus.
oh, Paul, did you want to ask Paul? If he
Yeah.
wants to?
Paul, do you have anything to say?
Paul Buscal, Brisbane resident. I want to thank Michael Roush for all the work you put together on this because it has been an issue. And he's right about the monies that have been given. It's highly unlikely that something could happen to the properties, but there is that allowance within the money that they gave that if a legislative body wants to change the distinction, they could pay the monies back, and they would basically allow that legislative body to do what they want with the property. Because, as we know, open space doesn't mean protected property, it just means public property. I like the idea of the conservation easement the most. I years ago was trying to work with groups around San Bernardino Mountain to form a North Peninsula Open Space District, because there's a Mid Peninsula Open Space District, and that was for the whole mountain, and that was basically to manage the mountain through restoration efforts, because the HCP really does a disservice to the mountain because they only work off the interest that's going to be coming in, that $4 million.
And they only work in what's mandated by the HCP.
Right. So I got together with a group from Post, and they were the heavy hitters from Post. They came up onto San Bernardino Mountain. They explored the Brisbane Acres, and why I decided to make contact with Post was because I believe they are the lead group in the entire region, trusted, and have a great track record. They are traditionally a Silicon Valley group. They focused on Highway 92 South for most of their work. A few things on the coast have been done. With that said, they didn't know much about San Bernardino Mountain until they came to it, and they were amazed. So, yes, there could be a conservation easement that could be turned over to a trust like Peninsula Open Space Trust, and then the city would no longer have control per se over those properties. But one of the big things that Post does is land acquisition. When they get into an area that they feel is very valuable, like they do feel San Bernardino Mountain is very valuable, not only do they acquire the land, but they have funds to manage the land. And, here in Brisbane, we have some serious issues with the land, and it's very costly to the city of Brisbane. So that was part of the thought, was that, a trust could accommodate a lot of what we're faced with. So I want to thank you guys for making this important. I want to thank the city for making this important. And I hope you can come up with something that works. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Can I ask you a question? So you're talking about conveyance of the property in fee to a trust, right? Actually,
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said conservation easement.
Well, that would be if the city put conservation easement in place. That's something that the trust would take over.
well, as I understand it, there are two possible arrangements. One is that the city would retain ownership of the property, but the trust would be responsible if we could find, if the trust was interested, the trust would be responsible for sort of overseeing that the land was used properly. And then the second one is the conveyance of the property itself. So that,
Well,
am I correct?
And I just wanted to add, and then Michael could tell you
Which
those
one are you-
particulars, but I'm talking about them actually, instead of the city acquiring the remaining acres, the trust would acquire the remaining acres.
The remaining acres.
Well, whatever they worked out with the city. This isn't, I didn't talk particulars with them as far as,
Okay.
how they're going to do things and what they're going to do, because I thought if they were interested enough, then they would do their work with the city and others that are the county and others that are part of that. The county was also on our hike. The second in command, Sarah, from the Parks Department, she came on our hike as well
Okay.
and was impressed.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
So, do we have, Michael, yeah.
So I kind of agree with Paul that I think a conservation easement or the transfer of the property to an organization that would conserve it, those are both attractive ideas for me. Part of the reason the open space district is not as attractive is, first, property owner opposition, and secondly, LAFCO. We don't know how tough it would be to get this done. And I think a conservation easement or actually conveying the acres to a reputable organization with deep pockets like the Peninsula Open Space Trust, I think that's very interesting, but I certainly think a new next step would be to talk to them and see, are they interested in which of those arrangements are they most interested in? We could also, I think, explore further the idea of an open space trust, although to me that sounds like it would be a lot more difficult, just politically difficult.
So, I have a question. There is no conflict between doing the conservation easement or the conveyance or even the declaration and separately forming an open space district.
No, I mean, they could, right, they could. It would be somewhat belts and suspenders, I suppose, but certainly what we can do is that we can, we can make some contacts with the trust. We can delve into a little deeper when we take it to the council concerning the formation and the pros and cons of the open space district. We could talk to the staff person with LAFCO and just kind of get a sense about whether or not that's something that at least a staff person feels would have any traction with the LAFCO, and present all that as well as your comments tonight to the council come this fall, and we'll see where it goes.
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me, because I would still like to explore. I definitely want us to do one of the protective things for the properties that we own, and the one that's deemed best and most protective, and that might involve post, but I also want to pursue, in addition to that, an open space district for the ability to be able to really state it and fund it and get more properties into it, and develop proper remuneration for property owners who would be willing to give up their hard-to-develop properties.
And we'll explore all those.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is just awesome.
Great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The memo was really well written and laid out the options very nicely.
Yeah. It's greatly appreciated.
Are we ready to move on?
Thanks, Paul.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to the approval of the minutes. I would like to make a comment, though, about the minutes, if we could. It's something I mentioned to Natalie, and I'd like to pose to the board as well and see if you guys are interested. But we all get the minutes. I got mine 2 weeks ago, and I review them, and I usually don't see anything wrong with them, but there's always a few little things. So I was going to propose to the board that we review the minutes and then email our comments to Natalie so she can make corrections and then email them back out to us, so we don't have to spend time reading the minutes while we're here and then making comments and correcting spelling errors and all these little nitpicky things that just take up so much more time. So
I would move that. Anybody want to second it?
Well, that's the way it's supposed to work, basically, except we don't get them a second time before the meeting. We usually get them the once early and then the second time in the packet.
I think what would probably work best is that we give her 72 hours. I mean, it'd be great if we had 72 hours that we actually got the minutes after the meeting, and then we had 72 hours to respond to them. So that we're not waiting to the last minute, so we're not putting her in a,
You mean for the second?
yeah, the
revision?
second.
Yeah.
So if we could get them, I know you've gotten them a
I
little
think it
earlier.
takes her
which-
about a week to put them together and a week
Yeah.
to get them out.
Natalie doesn't work full-time, so we meet Wednesday night. She's
Yeah.
here a few hours Thursday, and then she's not back till Tuesday, so.
Okay.
So you're looking at.
So, but anyway, if we could kind of set a deadline, you could even tell us, you know, if you give them to us by this, if you give me the changes that you want in the minutes by this date, you can have it out by this date, just so we know when we should get those to you.
Well, we've been getting them.
Yeah.
And-
No, not the minutes, but I'm saying if we're going to make changes,
And we,
what would be the date that she would want to have those changes to her? So that we're not putting you in a predicament or giving to you last minute, which is what I do, so actually asking for myself that.
You want the second mailing before you get the whole packet on Thursday before your meeting?
So when would she need those by, the corrections?
Well, the first one goes out about 2 weeks before the meeting,
Right.
so she would need them a week before that.
so we get the packet,
I'm asking Natalie.
sorry.
I would need them the Monday, the week before the meeting.
Okay. Any changes by 5 PM that day?
So that's 9 days before the meeting.
Okay.
Well,
just like
if
to
it,
have
if
that.
it was willing to give it a try, I'd like to give it a try and see how it works.
That'd be great.
Speed things along, and then we can just approve the minutes when we come in, and we'd be done.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to be at that place anyway, but that doesn't always happen. I think personally, I'm perfectly willing to respect your opinion and to try a second revision of the minutes, a second mailing of the minutes. But if I fail to read the minutes, normally I don't. Normally I read the minutes, and I normally read them when she first mails them out. But if I do happen to fail for personal reasons, because blah, then a second mailing is not going to change that for me personally. You know, I'm just going to have to, if I get that far into the month without having made personal time, I'm just going to have to punt. So, whatever chairs pleases the chair.
Okay, well, that's something I'd like to try and see how it goes.
Okay.
I'd just like to speed the meetings along a little bit faster if we can.
Okay.
Sounds fine to me.
So I move the approval of the minutes.
So, I wasn't here. I second that.
Well, then we should go to the question. Does anybody have questions about that?
I had sent a correction to Natalie. I'm not entirely happy with how it got corrected. I guess, but it's fine. Forget it. It's just a wording thing. The wording seems to indicate something different than what I said, but I don't think it's material, so I'll second the approval of the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And then, so our minutes are shorter this time. So I guess some people said to Natalie that the minutes need to be shorter.
I said.
Okay, you said. So that you want this to be shorter? Or the time that we spend in the meeting?
The time that we spend in the meeting going
Okay.
over things we've already gone over. Sure.
Yeah. But, so is it, because I thought from her email, she said that the written part was supposed to be shorter. Did I misconstrue that?
And I'm not sure who some people said but we put it on our list to talk to the council liaisons about, because we have gotten direction to have abbreviated minutes like they have when a meeting's televised, so we can talk about it when we meet with the liaisons.
Okay, so that was the direction from council? Okay, because all I heard was some people, so, okay.
But we can get
Yeah.
there, we can discuss it.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we wanted to discuss it as a committee at all.
Well, I kind of liked our longer minutes because it, as long as we were, brief in correcting them,
Yeah.
Because it kind of gave a fuller picture of what was going on than rather than going back and, watching in a 2-hour video.
Yeah.
So
I liked the
I like
longer
the
minutes.
document of the minutes, and I actually think the council should have more thorough written minutes.
Yeah, I understand. So we're going to talk to them about
The
their
liaison.
direction is, since,
Okay. Does it make any sense for us to decide what we want to ask them first? Should we be having a conversation about that? Maybe not at this moment, but,
well, I mean, you kind of are, so. yeah.
okay.
Is that what?
I think we all agree that we like the longer minutes, right?
Yeah.
Does the whole,
Yeah, I liked the longer minutes. I think
like
the
the longer
shorter
minutes.
time in the session is great, but I liked the longer minutes. Okay.
Sounds like that's majority, so.
Obviously, I keep them.
Me too. I'd actually refer back to them. So I guess it is something then that we would like to talk to council about.
liaison?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to chair and committee matters. Member matters, pardon me.
Well, I'll go with what Barbara and I did this week. We did go to the library, and we kind of updated the open space board in the library, and we left space for trail maps at the top. And what we've kind of done is, the way we've arranged it, we'll have trail maps this time, and maybe next time we'll update it and have something ongoing changes to kind of keep the board fresh is what we're looking to do. So I know Natalie's sent an email to the San Mateo County, correct? And they're going to send some, hopefully, get back to you and send some maps our way so we can add some trail maps, because we really want to kind of push the healthy perspective of going out and doing a hike and when you're depressed and tired, and really getting healthier by going out. So that's what we're going to be focusing the top of the board on. Anything else for that?
No, I think that's great. We're just, we've left that open space, that blank space there, so we're really waiting on Natalie with bated breath to let us know what's happening with those trail maps as soon as she can.
That'd be great. Yep, thank you.
Is it down to me then?
Subcommittee, or?
I've got some other chair and member matters I just wanted to throw out there. I finally got a mailing from Hero. It was very nice looking, but of course, I forgot to bring it with us. I was wondering if anybody else had gotten a mailing from Hero, or if they're,
Sorry,
Who's
what's
Hero?
the financing for energy upgrades.
property assessed clean energy? PACE?
Yeah. They're like PACE, only not PACE. What's the new name for PACE?
I think their part PACE is the overarching program, and they're
Okay.
one of the suppliers of.
Owns this Hero.
Yeah.
Also, Glenn sent to me a very interesting short little blip on methane and methane surveying. And I'm not going to go over the whole article here. If I remember, I'll send it to Natalie so that everybody else can look at it if you want. But one of the statements that very much impressed me was that a mother in Massachusetts got a hold of her own surveying equipment and found 20 to 50% more leaks than was being reported by her local utility. Now, not to cast any aspersions on PG&E, but I feel like, as I said, taking the fox's word that the hen house is secure is not the way I personally like to do business. It's my punk rock upbringing. I question authority, and I tend to question everything. And I know that staff was felt very confident about what PG&E said. And so without trying not to be disrespectful of your position, I still feel like this is an open, unresolved issue that we need to figure out how to get independent third-party verification on the health of our system at some point. And I'm continuing to work on that personally in my spare time, as little as I can scrape together. But if anybody has any input or suggestions about how I might go about it, I'm on round 4 of trying to work through this problem myself. So
I can tell you that PG&E knows there's problems,
yes,
and that's why our bills are going to go up almost $400 over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay,
So it's going to be significantly increased, and it's all because they know there are problems. So
okay.
I don't know if that's helpful or dishelpful, because there's kind of almost telling you, yes, there are problems.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are leaks, and I know PG&E acknowledges there are leaks. I'm concerned about the fact that this woman went on her own and found, hopefully our system's a little younger and a little better shape, but that she found 30 to 50% more than was being reported by the utility. And so
Did she say what
concerning.
tools she utilized to?
they had a university who had
Oh.
done some work along the lines of methane surveying, so she was able to get their tools. Unfortunately, the big company who has done this locally is Picaro, who has been bought by PG&E.
Lovely.
So yeah, that is no longer accessible to us as individuals.
So maybe we reach out to a university.
Yeah, I don't know if we can get some, short of reaching out to Massachusetts, I'm not sure which university to start with. But everybody keep your ears open and think about it and.
Have you requested a ride along with PG&E?
No, I haven't. I could do that.
No.
I think you should.
Okay.
They have that methane detecting car. I don't think they're going to screw up all their settings just to fool you.
Right.
You know,
They have a-
No, I think that's a good strategy to use, at least initially, because, as Michael says, they are working on it. It would be
Yeah.
nice to know, it would be nice to see them in action.
if anything, they're probably going to over-report it.
One of the interesting things this woman said is that a lot of the leaks they found were in the lateral lines that go off to houses, so they're fairly small, but there are lots of them. And so it would be interesting to see whether PG&E is are they just sniffing along the main lines? Are they using the equipment in such a way that it captures those little leaks, so that we understand what they mean by fixing the lines? So I think that's a good idea.
And speaking to a local plumber, I was told recently that there are more leaks on the inside of people's houses than there are in the main lines.
Yeah, and are they following those up too?
Some way
So-
to search that out might even be more beneficial.
I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but I guess since we're talking about methane inside the home, I will. A friend of mine recently posted a fart detector. It's like a little wand you can go around and so I asked him, I'm like, well, does this detect methane? And he's like, well, yes, it does. So apparently, I'm like, okay, maybe you can use the fart detector.
Maybe it should be part of our
around your
toolkit.
house.
Yes, part of the toolkit.
Fart detect.
So just find out how much they cost, Karen, and add it to the budget.
So it's
Don't bring it to
its
council
technical
meetings.
name.
They may have to change the technical.
Yeah, we might need to put a sticker over it. I'm not sure.
Methane detector, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
That's funny.
that's funny.
I still want to be out of here by 8. Let's go.
Okay, I've done a lot of work on the toolkit. I have not sent it to Natalie, and I'm not going to until Friday because I've got 3 deadlines on Thursday. So there. Tree watering. I thought we had discussed in this last meeting wanting to let the public
Barbara,
know.
can I interrupt real
Sure.
quickly? I think we skipped a few of our point bulletins.
Okay,
We went from chair and committee matters to the tree watering.
okay, well, I had things I wanted to say about the watering of trees, so shall I delay that until then?
Well, let me real quickly, does anybody else have anything to say about the subcommittee reports?
Do we have one on Day in the Park?
No, we don't have anything updated for that,
Okay.
for this meeting.
Barbara, you're now up.
Are we going to do any activities that require an electrical outlet for Day in the Park?
Probably.
We have a list of our activities. I'm afraid I don't have those on the top of my head. If we could refer to that, that might tell us whether or
Hold on.
not we need
I think I have it.
electricity.
Probably in our very verbose minutes.
Hold on.
No, nothing that requires an electrical outlet.
I didn't think so.
Okay. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
And then at some point, we need to discuss our response to UPC. And I don't see that on the list.
Yes, it
so-
A
is.
little lower.
It's
Oh, okay.
staff updates.
Okay, we'll do it there then.
Go back to that, the car charging station isn't going to be something we're going to have to be worried about in our area. That'll be
We might need electricity for that.
Yeah.
Somebody might.
What does that look like? Because that, I'm like, garbage cans with pictures,
We
toolbox,
were-
like textile recycling.
We were scheduled to have them, I believe, last week come and do a demonstration, and they had to
Right.
cancel on us. So
Okay.
I probably don't believe they'll be coming for Day in the Park.
Can you follow up with them and see?
I spoke to them at length.
And they said, no way, we're
If
not.
they're able to make it, it won't require us to have an electrical outlet.
And then what do we need to follow up with them?
Nothing. We're basically on their list. That they're based in Southern California, so if they're going to be back up here in this area
Okay.
around September, they will be contacting us to do a demonstration.
Otherwise,
But
okay.
I feel that's pretty unlikely.
Okay, I'm going to take it off our list then. Thank you.
Howard staff.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into the staff updates, and then Barbara with trees.
Okay. Do we want to do things in order?
Yeah.
Let's do things in order.
I hate when that happens.
So I looked into textile recycling, and through SMART, they only have drop-off locations that are in Richmond and Oakland, and it seems like there might be a fee associated with that. So I spoke to Karen about it, and it seems like something that we might have to consider with scavenger or future agreement. So that would require some more work and research on our half.
Did you find out how much the fee was?
No,
Because
but
I mean, if
which-
it's $50 a year, we could probably swing it. But if it's 5,000, maybe we don't want
Are
to.
you talking about the fee to drop it off in?
Yeah, for a drop-off location.
Richmond or Oakland.
And so, how would the textiles get there? You're talking about
So is
individuals
the fee associated with the dropping off or with the location?
if you were to drop off your textiles to Oakland or Richmond to a SMART location, you as an individual would do that, and there would potentially be a fee. I wasn't speaking about Brisbane as a whole having a bin and then us driving it over there. That would be something separate.
Yeah. I was hoping we could get a drop-off location, or maybe, but is that not something you talked about?
that's something that we would, maybe a subcommittee would be good for that, but if we'd have to look at
Yeah.
where we would collect
Uh-huh.
and where we would take stuff and what that cost would be and figure
Absolutely.
out how to pay for it. So,
Absolutely.
Natalie looked up, I guess, what was available and if there were close locations, or if South San Francisco accepted textiles, and they don't. So I think more needs to be done. I don't know if the committee has an idea of how much would be collected and like a concept of what we'd be doing, like how often, how big of a container and how often it would need to be taken to a recycling facility.
I really have no idea, and I don't even know how to begin to think about that. Like how much
And
we
neither
would
do we.
get.
That's kind of the,
I think we should
No.
talk to Recology, because when they came and gave a presentation quite a while ago when we did the no deposit, no return, they had talked about zero waste, and part of that was the challenges of collecting textiles. And so I think that we could pilot a program with Recology to have a textile collection, and maybe do it as a, even have a dumpster, once every 3 months.
Yeah.
And everybody knows this is the dumpster weekend for getting rid of textiles.
Yeah, or maybe
Do you
South
mean-
San Francisco Scavenger, since that's who our contract's with.
Yeah, do you mean Recology or Scavenger?
I meant Recology because that's who spoke about it, and they need to figure it out for San Francisco too. So they have more motivation than,
Well, they do have a program up in but I think it's through Goodwill Industries.
Yeah.
however.
Yeah.
Goodwill's been working on it.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'm a little bit worried about with recycling is that a lot of textiles can actually be reused because they're clothing.
Yeah.
And it concerns me that if we had a big bin for textile recycling, that a lot of perfectly usable clothing would end up in the recycling bin rather than being reused.
But they go
So-
through that before they,
I know the
Do they-
SMART
they sort
program,
it?
they sort
Yeah.
it. I'm not sure about other programs.
Parka, I know, sorts it, and so does those type of organizations.
Okay.
And just donate it to Parka?
You could, you can,
So we just
but
have
they
it
kind of,
dropped off it, or, whatever, start small with something, a smaller container, and then contact Park and see if they'd be willing to come by periodically and take what,
I know Parka dumps a lot of stuff that they don't like.
right?
yeah.
And the thing with Smart is that the crummy stuff then gets turned into carpet fill and rags and stuff, so it actually is top to bottom recycling.
Yeah,
as
whoever we
opposed
get
to
to
just-
do it.
Yeah,
Start small, get big.
yep,
Okay,
okay.
Firth Canyon.
So this was approved in the budget to do the vegetation
Wow.
management up there, but there were some questions from a couple of council members, and there was contact with Shelter Belt Builders and kind of a separate offline conversation that was challenging, I guess, for the full council to know, because it hadn't happened with all of them. So there was discussion about having Shelter Belt come to a council meeting, but instead, at this point, we want to put it on the list for the council liaisons, talk it through with them. At this point, it is approved, but we just want to talk about what the program is, and then that should be, I don't know if there'd be a process for the full council, but I'm thinking that we're trying to schedule the meeting with the liaisons. This may be something that happens in the spring, but it was approved.
Awesome, thank you. We should probably also, work with Shelter Belt on seeing their work plan for it, because they sound like they're not as enthusiastic as we would like them to be for that project.
Yeah, and I think there was a little bit of, I would categorize it as confusion that Shelter Belt works for the county and they work for us on the vegetation management and the acres, and that their representative and their estimator and program manager probably said that he felt like possibly the money could be better spent on a bigger area, but he's,
That's
kind of not
really his
relevant.
call.
It's kind of not relevant what his opinion is if the council wants to fund doing this project, so.
It really needs it, and I'm really grateful that passed, I really am.
Me too.
Okay, yay.
So go ahead, move on to the community garden.
So when the council approved the budget, the committee brought these projects forward, the Firth Canyon and the community garden, and one that I'm going to skip ahead. And they are looking at all capital improvement projects in the next, it was a 2-year budget, and then the second year, they're going to look at capital improvement projects. So they didn't decide yay or nay or anything at this budget approval process.
Okay.
And I just want to jump over Beacon Award, since we're talking about the budget, to the flags on visitation. And this came to the council as a recommendation from the Park and Recreation Commission for $6,000, to fund $6,000 to do flags on visitation. So I was told they'd been asking for a similar thing that we had thought of for a number of years, 3 years or so. And they're interested in having flags for Live at Mission Blue possibly, or concerts in the park, or Day in the Park, or such. And they would put up flags at different times of the year of Visitation Avenue. So I'm to understand from staff that we can have a quarter of that $6,000, $1,500, to do our Earth Day flags. But that cost is probably to make flags and not to install them, so that still needs to be figured out. There might be an assumption that's out of operating, but as far as I understand, we have $1,500 of the budget
My personal opinion,
flags.
that's just a waste of money.
Well, it's not relevant to what we're talking about. We have $1,500 for Earth Day flags.
Okay.
Bonus.
To the Beacon Award, we applied again this year, and it seems that potentially we could get platinum in our best practices spotlight area. So an update on that when we find out.
What did we apply, and what will we be getting platinum based on? I mean, we've done good stuff. I'm just curious in more detail.
So this is the award that we got the full award last year for gold
Uh-huh.
in all categories. So that includes basically reductions in greenhouse gases and natural gas, and best practices, which I believe there are 10 maybe, 10 categories that, cover water use, various other sustainable practices that Brisbane has implemented. And so this year, when we applied again, since we just got the gold last year, we can't, so many changes have occurred since then. So, but we might get a spotlight in just the best practice areas.
Mm-hmm. Could you maybe send out, I mean, I don't want to take time right now, but I'm curious.
What the best practices are?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, we got to know what we're doing right so that we don't stop doing it, right? And forget.
I think we already covered Restoration Day.
So there were questions at the last meeting about the deep root watering of specifically about watering of trees and the state of some of the street trees. So the deep root watering program has started up again. The question was about, one of the questions was about if people are collecting water as their shower heats up and they have a couple, 2-3 gallons of water in a bucket, is there value, number one, can they dump that on a tree if it's not a watering day per the drought restrictions? And number two, is there value in doing that? So the drought restrictions don't apply to hand watering, so that can be done on any day.
Mm-hmm.
They apply to irrigation watering, so.
Yeah, everybody knew that, right?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you had asked that since the last meeting. And what's being done on an order of magnitude for 8 to 10 foot diameter canopy trees with the deep root watering, they're putting in 10 to 15 gallons per visit.
Wait, 8-foot diameter trees?
Canopy.
Oh, you mean 8 foot tall?
Canopy.
Canopy, sorry. I was thinking big tree.
I
Okay.
think it's now you're making me wonder. 25 to 30 foot trees, they're deep root watering 25 to 30 gallons. And 40 to 50 foot trees, they're deep root watering at 50 to 75 gallons. So given that range, it seems like if it's a really big tree and you're putting a couple gallons on it, maybe it's insignificant. But if it's a smaller tree, it's actually going to be significant to put a few more gallons on.
Yeah, sorry, and how often are they doing this again?
They're doing a rotation, so each tree is hit about every 3 weeks.
I have a tree issue. I'm not sure if this is where to put it, but we've got 3 very large, very dead Monterey pines at the entrance to Quarry Road. They're within about the first 150 feet, and I believe that's city-owned property.
Oh, right. That was part of the proposal for the community garden, was to expand it in place, and it would remove at least that one that is to the downhill in the Quarry Park little area.
Is that like 5 trees in that area that are either completely or totally mature, and there's only one that's mostly dead?
Right.
There's another one that's on its way within the next year, and,
Right.
and the other 3 are, fully mature, so they're right behind it.
So, I mean, optimally, just talk to staff offline, but since we're talking about it, we thought the approach would be to take down the one that's dead, and then as the other one gets more unsafe, we would remove that too.
Or
Okay,
do them
there-
both when we do the community garden expansion.
There's more than one that's dead. That's the only caveat. I was just there yesterday. So.
And has anybody contacted the owner on San Bruno by the apartments about the one that's dead along there? I assume that, just following up.
By the apartments.
The list that was originally generated was mainly
Parker Industrial Park.
in the industrial
Oh,
part.
absolutely. The
And
original
then-
list was mainly industrial park, yeah.
Yeah, so no one has informed me about this one, so,
Yeah, I did. I think I brought it up verbally at the last meeting.
okay. Probably email is best, so
Okay.
I'll have a record and a reminder to send another letter.
So my original question with the tree watering was that we had discussed if we were actually going to actively encourage people to water their trees in between. And I thought that we had said that we wanted to do that, but I guess that the staff did not think that was a good idea, and I just wanted to get more feedback on that.
No, I think I wanted to find out how much, maybe that's what the point was about this, is how much water they were
Yeah.
putting on trees with deep root watering, because if you're encouraging, if Davy Tree is coming out and putting 75 gallons
Yeah.
down at the roots of a tree, and someone's coming out and dumping 2 gallons on top, it's probably pretty insignificant.
It doesn't hurt
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah,
But
I understand.
we might want to put those standards out that, as David determined, that's the right amount of water to be watering those trees, or was it?
Yeah,
just a
they're
guess?
certified arborists, they're the
Okay.
ones that are.
So we might want to publish that in the Star and encourage people to water their own trees on their property, that amount. 75 gallons is every 3 weeks is like, a couple of showers, and it's worth it to save your trees. And I think that people are being very restrictive about watering their trees and because they're so worried about water, and yet really the amount that Davy's watering for the deep watering is well worth it to save trees that we would otherwise lose.
Yeah, I mean, 75 gallons, that's a tenth of a unit. It's really
Yes,
not
It's really not
very much.
very much water in the big scheme of things compared to replacing a 20 or 30-year-old tree.
Keeping
from
in mind that people aren't restricted from putting water at the surface, but if your water runs off over the sidewalk, you are violating the drought restrictions. So it's not
Absolutely.
as easy for a resident to water 75 gallons into a tree
In
at
their
the
backyard?
surface. In the backyard, sure, yeah.
This is
so-
what I'm talking about, people watering trees on their own property.
Okay, well, some of
Yeah.
the trees on their own property are in the front.
Yeah.
And I think that if they are on a regular schedule, that we shouldn't cite them about that. I really kind of think we should be advising them to do that.
Has anyone ever been cited?
We are not in the practice of looking
Yeah, I didn't think so.
in residences, and people
Right.
don't have large front yards, but
We also
doesn't-
don't want to promote it.
well, and it doesn't mean
If
that
it's-
if someone didn't call on you and said your water is running down the sidewalk, that we wouldn't go pay you a
Yeah.
visit. And
Absolutely.
And if your water's running down the sidewalk, then
It's not
you're
going
not
on a tree.
effectively watering, and you'd want to know.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
were watering, deep watering.
yeah, and we're
trees.
trying to take the approach of educating people,
Yeah.
and not citing
Right.
them right off the bat.
So can we put that in the next newsletter or Star of what we recommend for watering your trees?
Yeah, I think space permitting, we can put a general article about, even in the drought, that it's important to save the trees. I might use more general numbers than what I
What-
cited, and that's a deep root watering program, but just that people are,
And let them know we have a deep root watering program for the city. I think people would want to know that.
And know that we're doing that to support the trees and that they can use their buckets of
yeah,
Yeah.
cold
it's a good idea.
water. Great.
And be careful lifting your buckets. I now have tennis elbow, acute tennis elbow
From
from,
lifting your bucket?
yes.
Put less water in your bucket
I can't help it, that's how much it takes.
every time?
Yeah,
All right. I try to do mine every day, but,
I do mine every day.
yeah. Okay.
But the cat water goes in there too.
You come over and do some workout.
Let's move on to RICAPs updates.
So the RICAPS working group has been meeting, and we've been talking a bit about building energy and home energy scores and possible ordinances, and I think we need to get the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee going again, because we've got
Sounds good.
information about what other agencies are doing around us, but it's definitely on the list to talk to the liaisons and get a read on where they want to go. The home energy score is, we want to advertise that. It's a cool program through the state, but administered through Stop Waste, to rate residences in terms of their,
Is it similar to Greenpoint rating, or?
yeah, it's similar, but another program.
Okay.
Just a quick comment on climate action and energy action. I haven't read the whole report yet, but the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy just issued its International Energy Efficiency Rankings this week. And the United States is better than it was last year, but we still rank number 8, and we're way behind number one, which was Germany. And one of the things that was mentioned in the executive summary is that one of the ways that the high-scoring countries did it was through energy disclosure ordinances. So that might be something that we should revisit. And I think, maybe we could look at Europe to see how these things are actually written, because they specifically said that's one of the things that accounts for their improved, their better efficiency than ours. So.
Sounds great, Glenn. I'm fully for that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the UPC letter.
So I think we forwarded the letter, that the UPC made a response to your letter to the Planning Commission and Council, and there'd been discussion that the committee was interested in responding, so.
I was just wondering, so I actually haven't read it yet. I was out of town until Monday, so I got it on Monday, and I've been busy since Monday. I read the minutes, but I didn't take time to read the letter because I knew I was going to have to give it my full attention. But I was thinking, rather than responding to UPC, maybe we should just draft or rather than like getting into a direct tit for tat with UPC, I guess is what I'm saying. Maybe we should just reiterate our position more articulately and send a second version of the new letter, of the previous letter, directly to council. Because I really don't feel like getting in a I mean, yeah.
Because the Planning Commission is slated to finish its action on the Baylands in July, or it may go over to August. So it would seem to me that if the committee is interested in giving its position on those things, that it might be better directed to the council, who's going to start taking up the issue come September, rather than back to the commission, who will probably be done with it by the time you got the letter done anyway, if you have a desire to do that.
I mean, I kind of think we said what we need to say to the Planning Commission. It's not, sustainability is our purview, but land use isn't. So I think we've weighed in about as heavily as we can in that quarter, and I'd be more comfortable moving on to focusing on the council for the reasons.
I agree with you.
Michelle, didn't you want to send a response to UPC? I thought I read that someplace.
Well, I think that we need to strengthen our case, however we do it.
Yeah.
So sending a response directly to UPC, I kind of agree with Barbara in that I don't want to get in a tit for tat with them. I think it's better that we do take the high road and reinforce by addressing these things in a letter to the council.
Some of them, some of them are just, never mind.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel, Glenn? I mean, I respect your opinion on this, and you were you and Barbara were the main crafters of the letter, which we all supported.
Yeah, I don't want to do tit for tat either. The one that worries me the most is actually 1C, High-Speed Rail's proposal is not part of the Brisbane Baylands application. When we wrote this, we wrote it from the perspective of what sort of land uses would we like to see. Mm-hmm. And we thought high-speed rail and maintenance, and I do think there was some confusion about hub and high-speed rail that we somehow need to clear up. So I'm not sure exactly how to answer point C. We sort of are going this way because we just wanted to say how we'd like to see the Baylands be used.
Yeah, and UPC is right. It's not part of the Baylands application.
Yeah, so
what?
Because, we decided to ignore the fact that this is a possibility.
Yeah.
As a city, we decided to not address it.
Right, our whole letter was written in that spirit that we advocated looking at the Baylands as part of the city and how well, kind of integrating plans for the Baylands with plans for the city. And so this this whole letter is just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I'm not really sure how to,
I don't think that I would address that one. I think that one's going to get addressed by the state of California.
Yep. Pretty much. Well, Glenn, do you want to work on version 2.0?
No.
Okay.
no, I am so sick of this. I don't want to ever see it again.
Okay.
But she will. Because
What would the rest of the committee like? I mean, I would like more help from the rest of the committee than we got. I mean, how do you think we should go about answering this?
What if everybody took what if everybody took a section and just did their best, and then we worked into crafting it into a cohesive letter?
May I weigh in here just real briefly? I still stand behind the letter.
yeah, I do too.
It's a letter that says how we'd like to see things used. It's not meant to be a document that the city council is supposed to uphold and
Yeah.
support. So if anything, I would just leave it as it is and call it a day. I don't
Yeah.
think you need to respond to it. I mean, they're just looking for something to respond to. So
Well, the question is, though, I think, Michael, how will the council look at this UPC letter? I mean, I'm
we talk to
a
the
little bit
liaison?
concerned about that.
Should we talk to the liaison about that?
You
I
met.
mean, is that
When are we
something-
meeting with the liaison?
It's not set up yet, and they've gone on break for the month of August, so I mean, we can put it on the list, but
Yeah.
I guess it's September.
I don't think the liaisons would be comfortable speaking on behalf of the council on
I
this
think
matter.
Barbara's right about that.
It's not an appropriate question.
Right.
Yeah, so taking your point, Michael, I still think we need to figure out some kind of answer to this, because this, quite frankly, makes us look like idiots.
Should we, well, it's the way they wrote it,
It's
and
how
did
they-
that on
yeah.
purpose.
It's
because
intended
that's
to.
fair, very much so. So do you guys want to meet? Can we meet as a committee, or we're not allowed? We'd have to be a subcommittee of a subcommittee. We can't, just the subcommittee can meet, so that we could all sit down and do this together?
Can we have a special study session just on this? That's not our normal
Well,
meeting.
certainly you can schedule a meeting, if there could be a majority of you at one time discussing subject matter jurisdiction, you can certainly, hold a workshop, special meeting, however you want to characterize it, but if you're going to have more than a majority at one time, you're going to have to, notice it as a regular meeting, or as a meeting. Alternatively, you could create a committee who would draft the matter, then bring that back to the full committee for further input. So that's sort of your options. I mean, you don't have the committee, you could do it, one person could do it, or, a less than a majority could put it together and come back and have it reviewed by the whole committee.
I have to admit that a draft to be reviewed by everybody seems to be the best way to do stuff like this. I think if I were going to work on this, Camel's nose is under the tent. I think what I would emphasize to the council is I would reiterate the sort of basis on which we wrote this letter, which is the land uses we would like to see in the Baylands, whether or not these land uses were part of or the entirety of any of the three plans is kind of beside the point.
Yeah.
So I think I would want to elaborate on that quite a lot rather than
Rewriting.
I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's important because even though land use isn't our, it comes under, open space and ecology.
Sustainability, these things are all
Well,
interconnected.
we were asked to
Ecology.
do this. I
Yes,
forget by whom, but we were asked to do
By
this.
the then liaisons, which were, Ray Miller
Right.
and so I feel that we should,
Yeah, the charge was not very clear, at least not to me, when we sat down to write this. Write something about land use in the Baylands, and of course, we have mentioned all three of the plans in here, but our charge didn't seem to be limited to the three plans. It seemed to be,
Isn't limited.
I don't think it was.
how do you think the Baylands should be used? And that's how we wrote the letter.
Right, and we spent months of
Yes,
meetings.
Len did spend months.
Barbara did.
Well, and before that, the committee spent months doing the EIR, draft EIR.
Yeah.
And so, we should have our say with the council, and not necessarily filtered just through the EIR process through the planning commission. And that's kind of what this letter is about.
Yeah.
And so I think that,
How long in detail does the committee think this ought to be?
Short and sweet.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be long.
yeah,
It just
Your
detail.
Your first paragraph you said when you started speaking was, this was our intent.
yeah.
I mean, don't make it for something it's not.
And I don't, if there's something that where we did make a factual error, then correct it.
Yeah. I think
Or
should
if we
address
did,
actually.
but misleading statements, no, they're not misleading. They are what they are, they're statements. So I guess I just would, from my point of view, I'd like us to review the letter again to make sure that we did not make any factual errors, so to speak, that we would consider a factual error, like, oh my God, it's not carbon dioxide, it's carbon monoxide, or something
Yeah.
like that. And then in terms of misleading statements, I mean, that they're statements, and do we stand by the statements that are in the letter?
So one thing I think we do need to answer somehow is Scharfman's point that, or claim that a transit hub, as opposed to a maintenance facility, must be located in proximity to housing. Do we want to say that we think the developments in Viz Valley and Candlestick are sufficient?
And Schlag.
And Schlag,
Well, that's
and
what I meant, that's Viz Valley.
and Geneva Avenue, and all the other massive amounts of housing that are going in this corridor.
Because what he said, it had to be a mile or something when I was listening to him.
Oh, I don't think so. I've often seen people walk from the
But
train
that's
station
what
to
they need.
Candlestick.
There are studies that demonstrate it does need to be within a certain distance. I don't know, but I think, we maybe should just say, well, even without housing in the Baylands, there still will be workers in the Baylands, and there are going to be lots of residents in close proximity. So I think we should answer that point.
Yeah. But if you go
Could
back,
somebody scroll to the next page of his comments, please, just so we could see.
As I said, I have not had a chance to read this yet, so we're
Okay,
gonna,
I did read it,
thank you, Glenn.
so I just wanted to review it. Okay. I'm ready for the following page. Okay.
Glenn, do you want a printed copy of it?
Hmm?
Do you want a printed copy?
Oh, I've got a printed copy at home.
Okay.
That's fine. I just didn't bring it. Okay. In the final page? Or when maybe it's not the final page.
Oh, yeah.
Pre-industrial levels of wetlands. Yeah, Barbara and I went back and forth on this issue.
Yeah. I think that's mostly my fault. I think I did not choose the right words. I think it's still a good thought.
Well, how about could we agree on sort of maximum feasible extent or something like that?
Yeah, we can hash through that.
Okay.
I'm willing to be flexible. I want words that capture a certain goal, but I think I didn't choose the best words.
Okay.
All right. So do we have a plan?
Well, Barbara?
I'm willing to give it one more go around because I feel like this is so important. And how about if I bake you a blackberry pie, Glenn? Because
Does that constitute bribery?
Oh,
committee
shoot.
members? Just asking. Don't say things like that with the lawyers here.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
I'm not trying to buy any specific opinion, just her time.
I'm just so sick of this thing.
So speaking
How soon does the committee want this?
I would say the first week of September.
You want a draft by the first week of September?
Well, it's not going to council until September because they're taking August off.
Yeah.
So,
So if we,
29th of September, okay.
yeah.
so if we had a draft by the first week of September for everybody to review and then approved it in our September meeting,
Then we can,
we would be good.
It seems like actually it would make more sense for us to have the draft for OSEC to review, and we are meeting in August, right?
I won't be here. I won't be here.
You can
Let's
still
do it for
read
September.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll,
But you could,
we can work.
we could always do it earlier, and
Yeah.
that makes it,
Yeah.
you know, if
Yeah.
we get it by August, she can still read it from wherever she is.
no, probably.
I kind of would rather do it sooner instead of later.
I would, too.
because
Me too.
School is going to start.
Yeah, my work is going to, my work.
By all means, do
is
it.
this
I mean,
year.
I just will be out of
Okay.
pocket for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll email.
And this
No, you
is
won't. I'll be in Mongolia.
absolutely the last time I look at this thing.
Don't say that.
So we want to talk about the next meeting, which is August 17th at 6:30?
I wanted to, if we have, I know Michelle needs to go, and if you need to go, go, Michelle, but I'm still a little unclear about where we're going with the textile recycling, like what is our next step? I just don't want to get to the next meeting and then be like, what'd we do?
I think our next step on the textiles was we were going to talk to Recology and also to South San Francisco Scavengers to see if they want to participate with us in a pilot program, and that we were going to look at other organizations like PARCA, although people don't like PARCA because they do throw things away, and also look at what Recology is doing with the Goodwill Industries. Does that about sum up what we talked about?
Yeah, and I think if the committee has any sense on how much we would collect, that might be part of the factor of whether we might have a collection station here, or you said an idea was bins a few times a year, and what the cost would be to then, if we found a source, to take that stuff so it got recycled. So
Yeah.
we want some sense of how much we're talking about.
Yeah, that's why my personal approach would be to talk to SMART or Recology or South San Francisco and see what their experience is with collection and what parameters they have. Like, we could offer you this program for this quantity for this money, or this other quantity for this other money, and then we could slot ourselves into those choices. But me just pulling a number out of the air I wouldn't even know where to start.
Too early.
Yeah.
But they may have an idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure they
I
have.
think they're going to have an idea for a city of our size, how many textile, what would be the amount? I mean,
Yeah.
I could be pretty sure that Recology knows
right.
probably exactly how much per household on an average per capita basis.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, before we go to adjournment, public comment?
One more
Oh,
thing.
Glenn has something.
I'm just wondering, while we're all four here, whether we should try to set a date for the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee?
Can we do that post adjournment so that
Yeah.
we're not holding up?
And
Okay.
I just wanted to throw one thing out, because I was remiss in not introducing the gentleman sitting next to me as an intern this summer in Public Works, and he's studying civil engineering with an interest in transportation planning, and he wanted to see what you do. He lives in South San Francisco. He's very familiar with Brisbane and with the hikes and the acres and the mountain, and his sister actually volunteered with San Bruno Mountain Watch last summer, too. So we may have something that he can present at the next meeting he wants to.
And you too can have your opportunity to participate this Saturday.
Yeah, Restoration Day. And what is your name? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Jesse?
Justin?
Justin, we'll look for you Saturday morning, Justin.
Nice to meet you,
Hi,
Jeff.
Justin. Nice to meet you.
Justin told me that he's changed his major after this meeting.
Don't blame him.
Good. Thank you. We're glad yeah.
Paul, did you have anything?
Where do you go to school?
Oh,
We're glad to have you.
Come on up.
I actually do. I just want to let the Open Space and Ecology Committee know that the city of Brisbane agreed to give Mountain Watch $20,000 for the next 2 years to expand our wetland Guadalupe Valley stewardship that we're doing.
Congratulations.
And so we did have a one-time event behind South Hill, which has a year-round creek back there. So that is where part of our focus is going to be at. And I wanted to thank the city of Brisbane and was excited to let you guys know that that was happening. So
Fabulous.
excellent.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. We're
Yay.
so proud of our city.
yes, I am too. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh, and if you ever think this isn't important and you ever get disheartened by how much work we do, just try reading Hot, Flat, and Crowded. I'm about halfway through it, and my head is spinning.
Can I get a motion for adjournment?
Absolutely. Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting's over.